What point does the brand step in and go, right, we're opening a lawsuit against you because of you've said that this brand fits this car and we're pricing it differently. And he started doing really brutal, honest reviews on cars. The brands were coming in there.
What happens when the career you thought would define your life suddenly disappears? For Mat Armstrong, a devastating BMX injury could have been the end of the story.
A little bit of an accident. Yeah, so we won't go into detail what actually happened.
Instead, it may have been the moment everything changed. From working with his father's tools to rebuilding a wrecked Audi TT, Armstrong slowly transformed a setback into a career nobody could have predicted. Then came the Bentley, the millions of viewers, and eventually, some of the rarest and most expensive cars on the planet. But how did a former BMX rider go from humble garage projects to rebuilding hypercars like a Bugatti? Today, we're uncovering the setbacks, breakthroughs, and secrets behind Mat Armstrong's incredible rise. The fall before the rise. Every origin story needs a beginning, and Mat Armstrong's begins nowhere near a car. Born on the 11th of June 1993, in Leicester, England, Armstrong grew up in a household where mechanical work was simply part of daily life. His father, Tony Armstrong, worked as a mechanic, and the sound of tools against metal.
I think my dad really enjoys it. He's been a mechanic his whole life and had to deal with customers. He didn't necessarily want to be a mechanic.
Was as familiar to him as any nursery rhyme. But as a teenager, cars were not the dream. BMX was. Armstrong pursued competitive BMX riding, with the kind of single-minded focus that defines most professional athletes, treating every session as a step toward a career built on speed, precision, and risk. For a while, that path looked like it might actually work. BMX riding rewards exactly the traits Armstrong would later become known for: mechanical sympathy, a tolerance for physical risk, and a willingness to fail in public and try again. Anyone who watches his car rebuild content today can trace a straight line back to those years on two wheels. The discipline of adjusting a bike setup by fractions of a degree, of understanding how a small mechanical change translates into a completely different feel on the track, would later resurface in how he approaches a torque setting or a suspension geometry on a wrecked hypercar. Then came the injury that ended it. Details of professional athletes' setbacks rarely make headlines outside their own community, and Armstrong's is no exception. What is widely reported is that a career-related injury closed the door on competitive BMX riding, forcing him to look elsewhere for both income and identity. For most people, that kind of ending is simply an ending. A career stops, and life moves on to something unrelated. But Armstrong's response to that setback is arguably the most important decision of his professional life, even though it did not look like a decision at the time. He did not walk away from mechanical work. He simply redirected it. In 2013, Armstrong began posting BMX content to YouTube, treating the platform the way most creators did in that era, as a hobby.
If you're interested in this, make sure you click subscribe now, because we'll be there'll be a few videos on this as it goes step by step.
A place to document a passion rather than build a business. The videos were rough by today's standards, shot without the production values or narrative structure that now define his channel. But the instinct to document, to narrate, to let an audience watch the process rather than just the result, was already there. That instinct would prove far more valuable than any single BMX trick. What makes this chapter of Armstrong's story worth dwelling on is not the injury itself, but what it reveals about resilience under uncertainty. He did not have a clear plan to become a car restoration YouTuber. There was no 5-year roadmap, no market research suggesting that wrecked car content would become a global phenomenon. What he had was a skill set inherited from his father, a platform he had already started experimenting with, and no obvious alternative. Necessity, more than ambition, pushed him toward the workshop. It would be tempting to frame this as a triumphant pivot, the kind of clean narrative arc that documentaries love to compress into a single montage. The reality was almost certainly messier. Years of low-view videos, inconsistent uploads, and the quiet grind of learning a trade well enough to perform it on camera without embarrassment. Armstrong has spoken, across various videos over the years, about starting with basic repairs and budget-friendly modifications, rather than the 6- and 7-figure hypercars now associated with his name. The Mat Armstrong who rebuilds Bugattis today spent years first proving himself on far humbler machinery, one modest project at a time, long before any manufacturer would have recognized his name. That gap between where he started and where he is now is the entire point of this story. It is easy to look at a creator with millions of subscribers and assume the trajectory was inevitable. It rarely is. Armstrong's path ran through a cancelled athletic career, a father's toolbox, and years of unglamorous work before anything resembling a breakthrough arrived. The breakthrough, when it came, would not be a single viral moment. It would be a car. There is also a broader pattern worth noting here, one that extends beyond Armstrong specifically. A number of creators who now dominate automotive YouTube began in entirely unrelated fields: action sports, fitness, gaming, before an injury, a market shift, or simple financial necessity pushed them toward a camera and a garage. What separates the ones who lasted from the ones who did not is rarely raw talent alone. It is usually the willingness to treat the first, unglamorous years as an apprenticeship rather than a shortcut. Armstrong's years of low-view uploads were not wasted time. They were the training ground for everything that followed. The Audi TT that started it all. Every long-running YouTube format has an originating project, the video, or series, that essentially invents the formula everything after it will follow. For Armstrong, that project centered on a damaged Audi TT. The car had been badly damaged in a crash, and Armstrong purchased the salvaged vehicle and documented the full rebuild process.
We'll start off with the rear. The rear beam that the spring sits on it's actually bent here, but as you know, there's steel bolts.
And that series became his first significant automotive content, helping establish the format he is still known for today, buying wrecked or damaged cars and restoring them to working condition on camera. It is worth pausing on why this particular format worked, because the mechanics of it are less obvious than they first appear. Car restoration content already existed before Armstrong arrived, but much of it followed a fairly narrow template: professional garages, polished presenters, and a finished product revealed at the end, with little attention paid to the messy middle. Armstrong's approach inverted that. The wreck was the star of the video as much as the finished car. Viewers watched every stage: the initial inspection, the parts search, the setbacks, the moments where a part did not fit or a system refused to cooperate, rather than only the triumphant reveal. This mattered because it changed the emotional stakes of the content. A video that shows only a finished, gleaming supercar invites admiration, but it does not invite investment. A video that shows a genuinely wrecked car, its bodywork torn and its systems failed, and then follows every subsequent decision made to bring it back, invites something closer to suspense. Viewers were not just watching a car get fixed, they were watching a problem get solved, one obstacle at a time, with real uncertainty about whether the next attempt would work.
it's still knocking. I'm thinking, oh my God, it's got to be the diff. Like, it's going to be too expensive to repair because obviously you guys know, is it?
The Audi TT project also established something else that would become central to Armstrong's identity: transparency about cost. Rebuilding a written-off car is rarely cheap, and Armstrong made a habit of showing exactly what parts cost, how much labor was involved, and whether a given project was actually financially sensible. This kind of honesty is not universal in automotive content, where sponsorship arrangements and brand partnerships can sometimes blur the line between genuine opinion and paid promotion. Armstrong's willingness to show the real math, including projects that lost money or took far longer than expected, built a specific kind of trust with his audience that would compound over the following years. It is also worth noting what this early period was not. It was not glamorous. Armstrong was not yet working with hypercar manufacturers, was not receiving factory support, and was not operating out of a professional studio space. The Audi TT rebuild took place in the kind of ordinary domestic garage familiar to any hobbyist mechanic, using largely the same resources available to his viewers. That relatability is easy to overlook in hindsight, but it is arguably the single biggest reason the format resonated. Viewers were not watching an untouchable expert perform magic in a facility they could never access. They were watching someone with his father's old tools work through the same kind of problems they might face themselves, just at a slightly higher stakes level. From a content strategy standpoint, the Audi TT project also demonstrated something that would guide Armstrong's channel for years afterward.
Welcome back to another Mat Armstrong video. Today, Hannah has left me the keys for the Audi TT, even though this channel is called Mat Armstrong.
The willingness to commit fully to a single vehicle across multiple videos, rather than treating each upload as a standalone piece of content. This series-based structure kept viewers returning specifically to see how one particular story would resolve, rather than simply sampling unrelated content. It is a subtle but important distinction, and it is one that automotive YouTube as a genre would increasingly adopt in the years that followed, in no small part because creators like Armstrong proved it worked. None of this means the Audi TT rebuild alone made Armstrong a global name. It did not. What it did was prove the model. Wrecked car, honest process, real stakes, relatable setting, worked well enough to be worth repeating. And repeat it he did, moving from the Audi TT to a series of increasingly ambitious projects across brands including Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz, and eventually far higher-end marques, each one adding to a growing body of evidence that this approach to automotive content had real staying power. The pattern established with that first wrecked Audi would, within a few years, be applied to a car that would change the scale of his channel entirely. The Bentley that built his empire. If the Audi TT proved the format, the project that proved its ceiling was a Bentley Continental GT. Armstrong purchased and restored a damaged Bentley Continental GT during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that project helped grow his audience substantially. The timing mattered as much as the car itself. The context surrounding that project was unusual in ways that directly benefited the kind of content he was making. During the early phase of the pandemic, large portions of the world's population were confined to their homes for extended stretches.
I'll be working from home a little bit, but chilling out here with my mum since we've been in lockdown. There was also a 1,000-piece puzzle done in our house.
And viewing habits shifted accordingly. Long-form content that could be consumed in extended sessions, rather than short, disposable clips, saw a measurable rise in engagement across many platforms. Automotive restoration content, with its serialized structure and hours of footage per project, fit that shift almost perfectly. Viewers who might once have watched a 5-minute car review instead found themselves following a Bentley rebuild across dozens of episodes, invested in a project with real duration and real stakes. The Bentley itself was also a meaningful step up in prestige from the Audi TT and the modest hatchbacks that preceded it, a name most viewers understood instantly as luxury, craftsmanship, and expense. Rebuilding one from a damaged state demonstrated a jump in both mechanical ambition and financial risk, signaling that Armstrong's channel was evolving beyond its earlier scope. It was proof of concept at a higher tier, the same transparent, unpolished approach that worked on an Audi TT could scale to a car worth many multiples more, without losing what made it work in the first place. That risk was real. Committing significant capital to a written-off luxury car during a period of global economic uncertainty was not a safe bet. Parts supply chains were disrupted, costs were unpredictable, and the resale market for restored luxury vehicles was far from guaranteed. Armstrong's willingness to proceed anyway, and to document every complication along the way, reinforced the authenticity his audience had come to expect. When the project ran into supply problems or unexpected costs, viewers saw those obstacles in real time. The audience growth that followed was not simply one video going viral. It reflected a broader recognition that Armstrong's channel offered something distinct from both traditional car reviews and higher-budget, professionally staged restoration shows. High stakes, high-value vehicles treated with the same unpolished honesty that had defined his earliest, lowest-budget projects. That combination proved to be a durable formula, rather than a temporary novelty. This period also marked the beginning of Armstrong expanding beyond a single channel.
We're slowly building up this channel, and this is what it's all about. And let's get in the car.
As growing footage volume led to additional channels for shorter clips, secondary projects, and behind-the-scenes content. A level of operational maturity his earliest BMX-era uploads gave no indication of. The Bentley project marked a clear before and after point in his channel's history. Before it, he was building an audience one modest project at a time. After it, he was recognized as a serious voice in high-value automotive restoration. And unlike many creators who saw a similar pandemic-era surge fade once viewing habits normalized, Armstrong's growth held, a strong indication that what attracted viewers to the Bentley project was not simply timing, but the format itself. The trust Armstrong built. There is a specific kind of credibility that Armstrong has built over the years, and it is worth naming precisely because it does not come from where credibility in the automotive world traditionally comes from. He did not train as a factory-certified technician for Lamborghini or Ferrari. He does not hold an engineering degree. He has no formal manufacturer backing underwriting his early projects. What he built instead is a form of trust that comes entirely from consistency. Thousands of hours of visible, honest work, viewable by anyone willing to watch. This distinction matters more than it might first appear. In much of the automotive industry, expertise is credentialed. Manufacturers train their own technicians.
Automotive industry is going through a digital transformation. If you look at the design and at the manufacturing stage,
Certify their own specialists and generally treat outside repair work, particularly on rare or expensive vehicles, with a degree of suspicion, sometimes bordering on hostility. Independent restorers working on high-value cars have long faced friction from brands protective of both their intellectual property and their reputation for quality. Armstrong's entire career has unfolded largely outside that system, which makes his growing reputation within the wider car community somewhat unusual. What replaced formal credentialing, in Armstrong's case, was radical transparency. Nearly every video follows a similar structural honesty. Here is what the car cost. Here is what the parts cost. Here is what went wrong. Here is how long it actually took. And here is whether the numbers ultimately made sense. This is a meaningfully different approach from much of automotive media, where the financial reality of a project, the wasted parts, the failed attempts, the moments a repair simply did not work, is often edited out in favor of a cleaner, more flattering narrative. Armstrong's audience has come to expect the opposite. When something goes wrong on a project, it stays in the video. This transparency extends to how Armstrong presents himself as well. He has described himself, in effect, as an ordinary person from Leicester, rather than a trained specialist, someone without strong brand loyalty to any single manufacturer, and without pretensions of being the most technically skilled mechanic in the field. That framing is itself part of the appeal. Viewers are not being asked to admire an untouchable expert. They are being invited to follow along with someone whose learning process, including mistakes, happens in public. The workshop culture Armstrong has built also plays a significant role here. His projects are rarely presented as solo efforts. His team, and, at various points, his family, are visibly involved in the process, reinforcing the sense that this is a real working environment rather than a stage set. This matters for authenticity, in a genre where staged environments and scripted personalities are common. A workshop with visible clutter, imperfect lighting, and genuine conversation between people who actually work together reads very differently to an audience than a sterile studio built purely for content production. It is worth being precise about what this transparency has and has not earned Armstrong. It has earned him a large, loyal audience and a reputation within a specific corner of car culture as one of the more trustworthy voices covering high-value vehicle restoration. What it has not necessarily earned him, at least not in any way that can be stated as confirmed fact, is formal endorsement or partnership from major hypercar manufacturers. Reports and online speculation about manufacturer relationships circulate periodically within the automotive YouTube space, as they do around most creators working with rare and valuable vehicles. But such claims should be treated with appropriate caution.
It works. But just look at the state of in here. It is completely stripped apart. And to let you guys into a little secret,
Unless a brand has made an official statement, what can be said with confidence is narrower, and in some ways more interesting. Armstrong has built a global audience and a reputation for honest, technically substantive content entirely on the strength of the work itself, without needing a manufacturer's approval to do it. That absence of corporate backing is not a gap in his story. It is close to the entire point of it. The trust his audience places in him exists precisely because it was not manufactured by a marketing department. It was built one transparent, unglamorous project at a time. What comes next? Armstrong's channel today looks almost nothing like the modest home garage setup that produced the Audi TT rebuild more than a decade ago, and the trajectory of his project list.
as you can see, it is damaged to the TT pretty bad. Back wheel, this completely snapped. So this will begin the project.
Tells that story clearly. Where early videos centered on hatchbacks and mid-range luxury cars, recent projects have moved into genuinely rarefied territory, including vehicles like the Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, a car that occupies one of the most exclusive tiers in the entire automotive industry, with a level of engineering complexity and parts scarcity that would have been almost unthinkable for a creator working out of a domestic garage a decade ago. This shift matters for more than the obvious reason that expensive cars generate attention. Working on a vehicle at the Bugatti level requires a level of technical knowledge, specialized tooling, and parts access that simply was not available to Armstrong in his earliest years. That he has reached a point where projects of this caliber are within reach reflects both the growth of his own technical skill over the course of hundreds of documented rebuilds and the growth of the resources, workshop space, team, industry contacts that his channel's success has allowed him to accumulate. It is worth being careful here, in the same spirit of transparency that defines Armstrong's own content, about what can and cannot be stated with confidence regarding his current standing in the wider automotive industry. His combined subscriber count across his channels has grown substantially over the past several years, with figures cited in different sources varying depending on when they were measured, a reflection of genuinely rapid growth rather than any single inconsistency. What is consistent across virtually every account of his career is the trajectory. A creator who began with the least glamorous end of automotive content has, through sustained and visible work, reached a point where projects on some of the rarest cars in the world are now part of his regular output. Whether that trajectory eventually produces formal recognition or partnership from major hypercar manufacturers remains an open question, and one this video will not attempt to answer with speculation dressed up as certainty. What can be said is that Armstrong's path to this point has been unusually well documented, arguably more thoroughly documented than almost any other creator in his space, given that nearly every stage of his development, from the Audi TT onward,
We're going to go through all of the common problems of the Audi TT.
exists as public video content available to anyone willing to watch it. Few professional trajectories, in any industry, offer that level of visible progression. There is also something worth noting about what has not changed, even as the cars have grown more exclusive. The core structure of Armstrong's content, showing real costs, real setbacks, and real uncertainty about outcomes, remains largely intact even on his highest-profile projects. A Bugatti-level rebuild carries financial risk that dwarfs anything involved in the original Audi TT project, and Armstrong continues to document that risk in the same unflinching way he did more than a decade ago. That consistency, more than any single project or partnership, may be the most reliable indicator of where his career goes from here. The scale of the cars has changed considerably. The underlying approach has not changed at all. What began as a response to an ended athletic career has become, over more than a decade, a body of work spanning hundreds of vehicles and an audience in the millions. The story is not finished. Armstrong's most ambitious projects, including his current work on some of the rarest cars in the world, suggest a creator still very much in the middle of his own arc, rather than at its conclusion. But the foundation of that arc, built project by project on a form of trust that cannot be purchased or manufactured, is already established well enough to explain why so many people keep watching. Mat Armstrong's story was never really about a bike, or a wreck, or even a Bugatti sitting in his workshop today. It was about what he chose to do the moment his first plan fell apart: pick up a tool instead of walking away, and let people watch every mistake along the way. That choice turned a cancelled BMX career into a Bentley, then a following of millions, then a seat at the table with some of the rarest cars on earth. No manufacturer handed him any of it. He built it, one honest project at a time, and from where he stands now, this still looks like the opening chapter, not the finale.